Hi everybody and welcome to Kevin Reads. Today we're reviewing An Abundance of Katherines by John Green. Last week we took a look at Looking for Alaska by the same author, and you can follow the annotation in case you missed that review. The book was published in 2006 and in 2007 was a finalist for the Prince Award. As I mentioned last week, John Green is known on YouTube as one of the Vlogbrothers, and you can follow this annotation to watch their videos. An Abundance of Katherines is a coming-of-age story starring a former child prodigy, Colin, who's dated 19 people named Catherine. He goes on a road trip with his only friend Hassan and tries to get past his most recent breakup, but also gets past a bit of an identity crisis. Honestly, this is my favorite of John Green's novels. A lot of his books are very tragic. This one manages to address just as deep of questions, but from a subtle and comedic perspective. And now it's time for the quick review. Writing quality? Excellent. Happiness index? Cheerful. Cultural relevance? Moderate. Should I read it? Please. Next week we'll be reviewing Feed by M.T. Anderson. Stay tuned for spoilers after the break. Okay, so the big thing I want to talk about in this book is the contrast between the extraordinary and the ordinary. Let's start with the extraordinary. This is something that is, it's a pretty common aspiration. You see it in musicals like Pippin or even films like Citizen Kane. We have this idea that, we have to matter, and maybe it's, living a crazy social life, or amassing wealth and power and influence, or just having that one great idea that can change the world. In Colin's case, he knows that he's not going to be the huge socialite. It's pretty clear that he doesn't have the social capacity to just go out there and live that sort of life. He's had sort of the fame and fortune experience when he was on the game show, but it's also very, very clear to him that this is sort of dwindling away, that he had been a child prodigy, but that he's past his peak, and that's no longer just an avenue by which he can truly matter. Which is why he strives for this third thing of creating something and putting it out there that's going to transform the world in the form of this relationship formula. What's interesting to me, though, is that Colin manages to get past this obsession as well by the end of the book. And I don't think that is something that is characteristic of all of us, certainly not me. There are a lot of adults that have sort of this fantasy of, leaving some sort of legacy, whether it's, some sort of foundation or trust fund for your kids, or, you look at all of the people who are writing memoirs right now, just trying to put something out there that will outlast them and give their life some meaning past the point where they've died. So it's interesting to me that that Colin manages to get to that point where he's comfortable without leaving that legacy and just enjoying the whole life experience. So that's kind of the extraordinary part. Now on the ordinary side, we have Gutshot, and in particularly Hollis, who tries really, really hard to try and maintain something that everyone knows is unsustainable. And I think that this is probably intentional, but at least for me, I kind of regarded the community and the stories told by the factory workers as, kind of pathetic. You get up, you do the same thing every day. And I think part of this may have been trying to emphasize Colin's perspective is what purpose and what meaning is there in that? But as the book goes on, we develop a bit more of a respect for the way that Hollis manages to sustain something that that truly is meaningful. The image of the tampon strings just sort of blowing about, I think is there in particular to try and emphasize the beauty in what Hollis is doing, in trying to support this way of life. So the idea of creating things in a factory just to bury them, it calls to mind the idea of the mythological figure Sisyphus. And Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down again, and then to have to push the boulder up the hill, watch it roll down again, etc., forever. So Albert Camus was very interested in this sort of absurd idea. He wrote an essay where he actually compares this act of just perpetually pushing something up a hill only to see it come down again. He compares this to working life, in particular factory life, and he says the workman of today works every day in his life at the same tasks, and this fate is no less absurd. So he kind of relates that we have this day in, day out experience. If we get up, we go to work to try and improve our lives, and what happens the next day? We get up, we go to work, and kind of sort of the absurdity of that is parallel. So Camus is interested in Sisyphus' thoughts as he's walking down the mountain at the point where the effort is over and he's about to start again. That what exactly is he thinking at that point? You know, it's the ultimate tragic point of the story where you realize that all of that effort was for naught. But Camus says that perhaps sort of in that moment, that when we recognize the futility and absurdity of everything that we're doing, that in accepting that, we can find some measure of contentment ourselves, and by extension, those of us who go to work day in and day out, and the factory workers in John Green's book can get some acceptance as well. And in fact, John Green wraps up his book with, and in that space, Colin thought, there was room enough to reinvent himself, room enough to make himself into something other than a prodigy, to remake his story better and different, room enough to be reborn again and again. For my book recommend, I'm going to suggest you read another work that has a lot to say about absurdism, Candide by Voltaire. It's a wonderful book, and it's really short, only about 140 pages, so it should be real quick for you to get through. Next week, we'll be looking at Feed by M.T. Anderson, which is a dystopian novel about basically internet addiction. I don't know what relevance that has to you or me, but we'll review it anyway. If you have a book that you'd like to see reviewed, please let me know down in the comments, and obviously don't forget to subscribe for weekly reviews. Have a fantastic week, and I will see you with Feed next Sunday.